I want to start with the real basics and try to introduce you to people in West Michigan, because while many of us have seen you on television and have heard your name, we don't know a lot about your background. You and I were talking about this before. You've been around some, you've seen a lot of the country. How did you end up coming to Detroit?
Ended up here in Michigan about 7 years ago because fundamentally a really good government program we had that like some of the good ones we got rid of, unfortunately. So over a decade ago, Michigan used to have a tax incentive for media production. And I came here to do a few projects back to back to back, met some great people and some folks that I'd known from Harvard when I was in grad school at Harvard, had lived here and were from here, and just reconnected with them. They kept telling me, man, you should get a place here, you should get a place here. And it did plant a seed at that time. At that time, I didn't have kids. So I planted a seed that said, when I have children, I want to raise them here, because I'd rather have my kids turn out like folks in Michigan than folks in Hollywood. So I adopted my son in 2015. Obviously a huge life-changing time for me. And right after that, 2016, I got a place here, moved here, made Michigan my home.
Before that, you had been on the West Coast, on the East Coast,
Yes.
in the center of the country. I mean, you had lived.
Yeah, I was born in Iowa,
Yeah.
and then ended up moving all over the place. And then my career, to be quite honest,
Sure.
Your career as an actor, you go where the work is. So, it's taken me all over the world and all over the country.
So after you had gone to college, after you got your degrees, and you had been involved in putting together documentaries and acting, and as I said, you were on CNN for a while. Now you come to this place in the road where you're running for the United States Senate. And before we get to why, how did you get there? What was the kind of the motivation for you?
Sure. So when I originally became an actor, I wanted to be like Harry Belafonte. I wanted to have a career of real substance in the arts, but at the same time, marry that with my activism. And one of my great joys was getting to meet him and do a fireside chat with him. And in many ways, his mentorship and his encouragement has led me on a more aggressive political path. And certainly losing him recently was just a massive loss to I think our society, because he truly represents activism at its finest. And so for me, the journey of being an activist, an artist, a writer, I've written 4 New York Times bestselling books. All of those books were about empowerment of some sort, solving a problem. My last book was called Letters to an Incarcerated Brother, talking about the mass incarceration crisis in our country. And so I've always wanted to have positive impact and legacy, no matter what I'm doing. And over the course of that journey, it's taken on a more political focused turn, because we see that our politics are broken. And so if you actually want to have a positive impact on communities right now, you have to look at it through a political lens, because folks are weaponizing so many things in a negative way politically, that unless you're politically active, and this goes all the way through the idea of voting, you have to participate, you have to vote. We have to reclaim our democracy. And it's something that I'm willing to throw my hat in the ring to fight for, and fight for people.
As we sit here, the dysfunction in Washington is in full display.
Sure is.
And one of the things that people often ask me or say to me is, when will things get back to normal? And the sad fact of the matter is that this is the current normal. I mean, there is dysfunction on both sides of the aisle.
There is.
We have people who don't communicate and who don't talk.
Yes.
So you've decided to run for the U.S. Senate. It's a rare open seat. It will be a very interesting race to watch, and it's one that could end up, well, it will in some form, but it could be one of the more pivotal races in the balance of power.
Absolutely.
So you've gotten into this race, and you laid out part of the why, but what is it you want to accomplish as you go around Michigan, talk to people
Yeah.
and talk to them about this race, why are you telling them that you're the right choice?
Well, a couple different things. That's a multifaceted
Sure.
question, and I'll try to walk through it. But I think the crux of what you laid out at the beginning, the fact that Washington is broken, and there's dysfunction in both parties, and one thing that I try to explain to folks when I'm talking to them that many don't realize is that when you go to Capitol Hill and you go visit sitting members of Congress and the U.S. Senate, there are a couple things that you notice that shouldn't be. And that's that every single one of them has 3 or 4 TVs going continuously on news. Are they sitting there reading something, working on something? No. By and large, 4 to 6 hours a day they spend on the phone raising money. So you combine the fact that folks are watching the news to figure out what they should do next or what they should say in social media. They're spending 4 to 6 hours a day raising money, and we expect something to actually get done in favor of people. The other part of the time, they're taking meetings with lobbyists, special interests, and big corporate interests, and making decisions through that frame and lens. It's not surprising that we've seen so much dysfunction. Now, that may be the new normal, as people call it, but I'm unwilling to accept that. Because what it's doing is destroying our democracy, and it's destroying trust in our democracy, because the fundamental thing we need, certainly, and this is what I hear from Michiganders all across the state, because one beautiful thing about running for Senate, I vowed that I would visit all 83 counties before the end of this year. And so I'm pretty far into that, but I still have a few to go. But all the way from Sault Ste. Marie to Benton Harbor, to Muskegon, to Grand Rapids, to Bay City, to Saginaw, to Flint, to Detroit, to Marquette, to Petoskey, to Traverse City, you hear the same thing. How come our Washington representatives aren't representing us? And how come I only see them when they need my vote, and I don't see them again? And how come I don't have any real way of connecting with them? Why aren't I represented in a real way? Why don't I feel that representation? And for me, I don't come out of a career in government. I come out of a much more private sector minded person. I believe in economic development. I believe that if you don't create jobs and you don't pay living wage and you don't have strong unions, then you can't have highly functioning communities. And so those are some of the things I want to fight for that I believe we aren't seeing folks in Washington fight for. What we're seeing is vitriol, division, and folks that aren't willing to put people first. And that's what this candidacy is about. And fundamentally, that's about what reclaiming our democracy looks like. Really putting people first. What does that mean? And that's what Michiganders want, and that's what I'm hearing everywhere I go.
When you talk to people and they say, my representative doesn't represent me, is part of that a function of the fact that in this state and in this country, about 50% of the people will disagree with their elected official because they have an R or a D after their name? And is some of that division also sown by that news that those members are watching coming out of silos that are similar to echo chambers that talk about the network that they pick to choose to listen to their point of view or to this point of view, and Americans do the same kind of thing and kind of stay separated?
Yes, you're absolutely right. Everywhere I go, I talk about this very thing. And I ask this exact question. All over Michigan, I say, do you find it odd that working class white folks in Michigan, particularly working class white males, at almost an 80 to 90% rate have been convinced to vote for one party, and working class black folks or black males have been convinced to vote for another party? Even though their economic interests are very similar, even though what they'd like to see happen in their communities are very similar, safety, security, good education. What is that about? So you're absolutely right. The weaponization of information to convince folks to even vote against their own self-interest at times is real. And so how do we take that on? You take it on by saying, you know what? I want to represent you and your best interests. And it's not about the party, it's about the people. And folks don't say that enough. And when they say it, they don't actually mean it. Why? I believe because it's about maintaining incumbent power on both sides, particularly federally. What do I mean by that? The barriers to entry are erected so high, particularly as it relates to money in campaigns, federally, that it creates very little opportunity for someone to compete for an incumbent seat. That's why people have been calling for term limits and things like that. If you actually had true competitive races, you wouldn't need term limits at all because folks would be able to compete and do that. We have an open Senate seat in Michigan for the first time in 20 some years. This is an amazing opportunity for Michigan to really think about what type of leadership do they want. And do they want new voices, fresh voices, and new leadership that represents everybody and the people's interest over corporate interest, over lobbyist interest, and over traditional government politics that we've fallen into today. And so to me, it's about breaking through. I'm running in the Democratic primary. So I definitely have to communicate and talk to the Democratic voter first. But after we win that primary, we're going to be running in a general election to represent all of Michigan. And I want to talk to all the voters here. That's why I'm going everywhere. Some people said, Hill, there aren't enough Democrats in that county. Why are you going? I want to talk to everybody there because I want to be the senator for all of Michigan. In fact, that's something we don't talk about enough, unifying Michigan. If you think about it, and I'll tell you a story. It was depressing. I went to Tigers opening day this year, and it was actually, the weather was nice. Not that the Tigers are depressing. I don't want. If you love the Tigers, I wanted the Tigers to win. They didn't make the playoffs this year, but soon. But just looking at Tigers opening day, all these people tailgating. Tailgating is one of Michigan's great traditions, and there were black folks tailgating in Detroit, and then there were white folks. They were eating the same hot dogs, drinking the same beer, laughing, but nobody was doing it together. If you really think about the level of segregation in Michigan, it's very high. And I want us to come together. The best version of Michigan is a unified Michigan. And the best version of the United States of America is a unified America. Michigan is one of the most diverse states in this country, and we need to partner together, work together. I met with a small farmer outside of Midland, and he literally said the same thing to me about health care that a single black mom in Detroit who lived at the corner of Mack and Drexel said. Those two folks, politically, you'd think are completely different. The Midland's white small farmer, male, and this single mom in Detroit. Yet they both had the exact same concerns about health care and the cost of it, and the fact that it's the number one cause of personal bankruptcies, and the fact that they're choosing between paying for their meds and paying their mortgage or their rent. These are real issues facing everybody in Michigan, and I want to be the person that helps represent both of those people and actually create some solutions.